I just wanted to introduce the webinar of today by giving some small technical indications. We'd like to remind you that this webinar is going to be recorded and is also live streamed through the CEPS website. Just the panelists will be able to turn on their cameras. And then during the webinar, you can post questions, which will be gathered by our moderator. And then after the interventions, he will be posting them. We hope that you enjoy the webinar, and I give the floor to the moderator, Professor Carrera.
Thank you, Miriam. Welcome, everybody. Very good morning. I'm Sergio Carrera. I'm Senior Research Fellow at CEPS. I'm part-time professor at the Migration Policy Center at the EUI in Florence, and I'm very happy and glad to have this opportunity and to chair this webinar on the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum. This event falls within the scope of a new project called ASILE, in French, Protection, Refuge, which is an Horizon 2020 project funded by the Commission and bringing together an excellent network of scholars and experts in Europe and elsewhere, focusing on issues at the heart of what is now being dealt with in the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum. And we just actually launched, in the scope of the ASILE project in our website, a new forum debate on particularly this aspect of international cooperation dimension of the EU Pact. And I invite you all the participants to have a look at our forum with very interesting blogs and contributions. Now, this event examines the Pact. The Pact is a very broad instrument. And we decided to focus today exclusively on international migration partnerships. So when it comes to the external dimensions of this policy area, in light of the United Nations Global Compact on Refugees, where issues such as global solidarity, issues such as equitable responsibility sharing are at the heart of the UN Global Compact focus, but also upholding international refugee law and human rights of every individual. Now, when it comes to global solidarity issues, it's always important to remind ourselves about the scale of the issue and the reality of the issue. And the fact is that Europe is not amongst the main host countries of refugees in the world. Perhaps only with the exception of Germany, these host countries are elsewhere. And if anything, the Global Compact calls for global solidarity, working together in what is a common issue of concern and attention. Today, we want to focus on the EU's commitments in this regard and the EU's agenda in this regard. Particularly, we are going to focus on what have been the lessons learned that we have learned so far when it comes to establishing partnerships with real partnerships, equal partnerships with third countries in questions of migration and asylum. But also, what is the EU's role in ensuring access to asylum and also facilitating legal pathways, complementary pathways, such as resettlement, such as humanitarian instruments, humanitarian visas, for example, instruments such as community and private sponsorships, while upholding the common bedrock of principles and standards on refugee protection. Now, we have an excellent panel, and I'm so glad that we have as keynote speaker, Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson. Really big thanks, Commissioner, for joining us today, to you and to your cabinet. We are delighted to have you in this occasion and look forward to hearing your presentation. This will be followed by a panel of discussants, excellent discussions, starting with Sophie Veld, member of the European Parliament, and someone who is being extremely committed and engaged in these discussions for some time, having this historical memory as well on this conversation. Next, we have Damian Boeselager, also a member of the European Parliament, the Greens also very much involved in the Pact, so thank you for joining us, Damian. UNHCR actually is a partner of the ASILE project, so I'm very glad to welcome Sophie Magennis, UNHCR regional representation for EU affairs in Brussels. We look forward to hearing also the very important contribution and inputs by UNHCR. And last, we have Geddes, who is Professor and Director of the Migration Policy Center at the EY in Florence. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us, and he's also part of the ASILE project as one of the partners. So it's time for you, Commissioner, for your keynote. We look forward to hearing your speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this. It's good to be talking about the external dimension of migration and also my recent proposed Pact on Migration and Asylum. I would like to start with this. The European Union should show global leadership when it comes to migration. And I think that these days that we are living in, I'm probably not the only one that are sometimes scared about how we talk about migration, and about, even worse, about migrants. Like if migration is a threat, and that migrants and refugees are sometimes being described as not really being human beings with rights and dignity. So I think it's really important how we act as European Union. And it's also important to remember that we should not have been where we are now with a prosperous continent and all that without migration. Migration is normal and migration is necessary. So we need to talk about migration and to deal with migration in a sober and pragmatic way. So I also think that it's important for us, of course, how we deal with migration internally in the European Union, but we have to recognize and realize that how we act is also important for others. If we are good at protecting the right to apply for asylum, if we treat migrants with aligned with their rights and dignity, that's also something that will make others to follow. But if we fail in doing that, that will also have an impact on how migrants and refugees are being treated in other parts of the world. So it's really important with our leadership, and of course, I mean, of course, we have to manage migration in an orderly way. Having said this, of course, not all migrants and not all refugees that won't like to come to Europe can come to Europe. That's for sure true. But we have to manage migration in an orderly and fair way. And for me, this is very much linked to protecting the right to asylum, and also to make sure that those in need of international protection and those that are legally coming to the European Union have the right to stay, they should be welcomed. They should be part of our society. And I think it's linked to each other, how we also make the distinction between those that are not eligible to stay, that they have to return. I think these are linked to each other in my view. And just also a personal aspect on in the crisis in 2015, I was responsible in Sweden, and Sweden was the country of the member states that took the highest number of asylum applicants according to the population. For example, in a few months, we had 35,000 unaccompanied minors coming to Sweden, and that was, of course, a huge challenge. And I learned a lesson then. I learned a few lessons actually, but one was that it's impossible to deal with a huge crisis on migration and refugee crisis for a single country. We have to do it together as a European Union. And I also learned a lesson that in lack of a common European policy, there is a huge risk of a race to the bottom. And that's really that would be really bad, both for of course for countries, but also for our values. So that's a bit as a background. Talking about now on the external part of my proposal, we have to realize that most of the refugees, of course, are living in other areas, and other countries than European member states are hosting the biggest amounts of refugees and migrants. So that's where we need to show solidarity towards migrants and refugees, but also towards hosting countries. And we have to do that both bilaterally, but also in our multi-international cooperation. And I think it's important that we should also develop a deeper partnership with the countries of origin and countries of transit. And helping and dealing with this, I mean, it's also the thing for third countries that migration is there and migration need to be managed. And this is also where we can help managing migration and also help protecting fundamental rights also in third countries. And I think that's important for us as well. And a specific aspect of this is to fight the human smugglers. And I must say, sometimes when I take part in debates, it's like the smugglers are good ones who help people to come to the European Union. But we have to realize these are very professional, organized criminal groups, and they are cross-border, and they have, you know, financing in some some countries, and they are acting in other countries, and they're very professional, and they don't care a shit. Sorry, but they don't care about lives at all. They are really there for the money, and they are using people and treating people very badly or risking their lives. So it's extremely important to fight the human smugglers. But to be able to do that, we also have to fight the root causes of migration and provide legal pathways, both for refugees and for migrants who would like to come and contribute to our economy. Of course, these legal pathways could never be for everybody, but the smugglers are not either for everybody. So I think these are really linked to each other to be able to do that. And what we need to do is to work even more with resettlement. It's also because for refugees, it's important that we can help people in need of international protection, even though those that are not do not have the means or the physical capacity to go through a long journey and pay the smugglers and all that. So it's really important with the resettlement, both that we can help people that do not have any other possibilities actually, but also that it's a better way of welcoming people in an orderly way and not risking lives, and to the society to be ready to welcome the refugees. So I would like that Europe to step up on resettlement. European Union is now the biggest pledges for resettlement globally, and of course that is bad. And we do hope that United States will change and come back to do resettlement again, because it's really important for refugees around the globe. But I'm now also proposing community-sponsored resettlement that could help top up with more resettlement, but it's also, I think, a good way to using this willingness that we see locally and regionally, where there is a group of people or community or region that really would like to take their part and welcome people in need of international protection. We should open up new possibilities for them to do so. And we also know that this is good for integration and being part of society and really being welcome. But then we also need to do much more when it comes to the possibility to come and work in the European Union. We are an aging society. We will not survive without migrants. And we already have a lot of migrants. Last year we had 3 million migrants coming to the European Union and got a residence permit. That's quite many. And last year, around 1 million left the European Union. So we are growing with 1 or 2 million a year, and we need that. So that's good for us. But we have to, of course, to continue doing this. And we are talking very much about those 140,000 that arrived irregularly, but the other ones are more important for us, and we should step up on legal pathways. Many of those would like to stay more or less forever in the European Union. Last year we had almost 700,000 people that got the European citizenship in a European member state in the European Union. So that means they would really like to stay here. So for legal pathways, it should be both for migrants that would like to come and stay here and live here, but also for those that would like to come and earn European salaries for a while, and then maybe go back to their home countries and have a circular migration, so that we help people to come here and contribute our economy as well as to their personal economy and also to their country. So I think this is the win-win situation, and that's what's needed when we look at upon the demographic situation that we have here. So this is where we're going to concentrate now. Of course, we have the blue card, but I think that we also, that I hope can be adopted by the co-legislators. But I also think that we should look for also low and medium skilled workers to be able to come to European Union and work here. And these kind of legal pathways we should develop together with specific member states and specific partner countries. One last thing I also will say is important for the solidarity with third countries is that when we do returns and when we help people to return to the country of origin, it's important to remember what was the background. Many of these people, they have used a lot of money. They have maybe borrowed money for their whole from their community where they are coming from to be able to pay the smugglers to come to European Union, and then they fail to get asylum and the residence permit, and they are being returned, or they are returning voluntarily. I think it's really important also with the reintegration measures to help people to reintegrate in the country of origin. So this should be part of the return sponsorship and the voluntary returns that we're also doing, that we help also reintegration. And this is when I talk with countries, partner countries, this is important. They say, yes, we are ready to welcome back our own citizens. We understand they can't stay in European Union, but they have to come in a way so that we are able to absorb them back in our society, and it would be very helpful if you could also help with the reintegration for people, so that would not be that big failure for an individual to return to the country of origin. And we have been doing that both from the European Union back to country of origin, but this is also how we have been working together with the African Union. For example, a lot of people have come as migrants to Libya, as Libya was the country of destination. They wanted to work there, and then they found themselves in an armed conflict, and they want to go back. And together with African Union, European Union, and UN, we had quite a big scheme for voluntary returns from Libya to the country of origin, and with significant reintegration measures. And I think this is also part of how we can help other countries to manage migration and to help migrants that find themselves stuck in a situation that is not sustainable for them. So it's important that we act as a global player, and that we have to remember that European Union has never ever been able to deal with migration alone. We can only do it together with partnership with countries of origin and countries of transit. So all those that think that we can manage migration by building high fences or trying to externalize migration, that's not possible, and it's not in line with our values, but it's also not possible. So we have to do it in partnership with third countries. And yeah, I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your call to set the example, for the EU to really set the example, and a global leadership you mentioned. It is also clear that you care personally about these issues, and it's also very much welcomed, I think, in Brussels, your positive role in really bringing light on how important it is when we talk about these issues to also set the example. And you pointed out the relevance of how do we talk about migration to desecuritize the topic, to de-dramatize the topic, you've also mentioned several times. And also, importantly, when you say that we have to do it together, that this is a question also of values, of when we work together. So really, thanks a lot for your presentation. Let's now move to the discussants. Starting, by the way, before moving to the discussants, I remind the participants, we have 180 participants. You can use the Q&A option. My colleagues will pass me those questions, and then I will be putting forward those questions to Commissioner and to the panelists. Sophie, the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Sergio, and thanks again to the Commissioner. We have been on many events together in recent weeks, and like you, I am very grateful for her personal commitment, and we also know that as a commissioner you're representing the college and you have to take account of what member states and parliament feel, but you also have your personal convictions, and that's very visible. There was one sentence though in the presentation of the commissioner which struck me, because I'm not sure if you said that deliberately, but it contrasts a little bit with your own views, but it expresses very well what many people think. We have to fight the root causes of migration. It's a bit like, we have to fight the weather. Migration is as old as the world. It's always there. And I would actually suggest that, we know Ellis Island. It's a museum on the on Ellis Island, an island just off the shore of New York, where immigrants coming from all over the world, but including from Europe, arrived. And we have the equivalent of that in Europe. It's in Antwerp. It's called the Red Star Line Museum, and it's the place where 2 million Europeans have left Europe for mainly the United States. And I think it should be compulsory for every single student to visit that museum, because there you can see with your own eyes, what the world was like 100 years ago when we were the migrants. We were massively leaving this continent to look for, a better future. And that's exactly what other people in the world are doing right now. And the whole prosperity of the United States is built on that. So I think I completely agree with the commissioner. Migration is normal. It is part of our human DNA. And I actually also think that in Europe, we don't actually have an immigration problem. Many countries in Europe have an emigration problem. They have a problem with people leaving. So what we are doing is completely the wrong way around. And that is because we have allowed xenophobes and populists to completely monopolize the agenda of migration. And it seems that we are no longer able to talk about migration in terms, not even of a normal policy, but in terms of something positive. If you say something positive about migration, you're accused of at best being not realistic, and at worst being a traitor, and you deserve all sorts of diseases or even death. Now, I think we need to distinguish very clearly when it comes to our external, the external dimension of this, between people in need of protection and people who want to work. Now, if you're looking for a better life and you want to work, that's not a crime, not last time I looked anyway. And that is why we feel that the package of the Commission, and we understand the reasons why, is falling short a little bit on proposals for legal labor migration. And I see that measures have been announced for next year, but we fear that it's not going to be comprehensive enough, simply because the member states have no appetite. And that is why I'm very pleased that at the proposal of my group in Parliament, the Renew Group, the European Parliament is going to draft a legislative initiative proposal on legal labor migration. We're going to make a comprehensive proposal, and we hope that Mrs. von der Leyen, the President of the Commission, is going to stick to the promise that she made when she was looking for the vote of the European Parliament, that she would treat legislative initiative proposals as if we have a full right of initiative. Then another issue is our relationships, dealings with third countries. We would strongly warn against the tendency of making quick, dirty deals with third countries, informal deals with no scrutiny, judicial parliamentary scrutiny, no way of editing the financial flows, and basically only with only one obsession in mind. We give you a bag of money, please keep your people there. And there we see some really dodgy stuff. I mean, why is the European Union funding dictatorial regimes? For example, we are paying, I believe it was Eritrea, if I'm not mistaken, we've given them millions and millions of euros in order to build a system to monitor their citizens, register their citizens, and check their travel movements. Hello? We are funding a dictatorship so that they will keep their people there so they don't migrate to Europe. I mean, come on, that's not in line with our values. But also the Turkey deals with Libya are just shady. That's not in line with our values. And it hasn't done a thing to stop people moving. Development aid should be development aid and should not be used for migration policies. But let's also not just look at development aid, but let's also look at trade. I mean, if we had proper, honest trade deals with, some of the countries of origin, then, they would actually probably, see more economic growth and no reason for their people to leave. And again, many times people leave a country because it's governed badly. So we are making a double mistake if we are funding bad governance and corrupted governments. Finally, also on the legal labor migration, we need formal agreements. We need avenues for legal labor migration, but also in things like readmission agreements. We can already introduce an element of, for example, saying, okay, if you cooperate with the returns of asylum seekers whose application has been rejected, then we can say you get so many work permits, so many visa for people who can then come to the European Union to work, which is a win-win-win situation. So we're really, from the European Parliament, will work on the Migration Pact, but these are some of the elements that we will be pushing hard for, and I hope for the support of the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, for bringing light to the importance of ensuring democratic scrutiny. And indeed, the European Parliament, not only co-legislator in this area, but also very much involved as giving consent for international agreements and ensuring accountability of all these instruments. And also, indeed, what you mentioned, that Parliament has been quite clear on the need to develop legal pathways, and it's actually very good news to know that this own initiative is going to be put forward as what I believe is a central issue. Thanks a lot, Sophie. Next, Damian.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, also for the interesting remarks of the previous speakers. I think in one thing that Ylva, you and I have in common is that 2015 really shaped us. So I was also in the German office for migration and asylum back then, and I think my experience was a similar one, that basically this is an issue we can only solve together, or an opportunity that we can only approach together. And so, I mean, that led to me actually joining politics and building a European movement, and then being part of this parliament. So it was really a very shaping time for me. I want to quickly react on one thing similar to what Sophie just said. I think we need to make sure that we don't link issues which shouldn't be put together. And the first one, and that was also something that I learned before joining the parliament, I think it doesn't make sense to think that development aid is linked to the current levels of migration and asylum. I think that's just a wrong combination. It's very valid to do development aid and to look at countries and to see, or development cooperation, and to see how we can work together to improve, to build rule of law and all the other elements of development cooperation. But I don't think we should put them in one basket with root causes and migration. I think that is two separate issues. And it's also a false idea that we can actually steer the amounts of migration via that kind of approach. And the second one is actually asylum and migration. And that's an interesting one, because I do care a lot about our asylum system, and I do care a lot about a more functioning migration system, immigration system, labor migration system, as I will elaborate in a second. But I do believe that we should see them separate. Our I think responsibility is to upkeep, or to keep up the right to asylum, independently of everything else, and have an asylum system that is not built around suffering, but actually, a humane kind of living standard and potential chances to integration, and not traumatization throughout the process. And that is our key responsibility, and that cannot be offset with migration and new channels. I think that's important. We cannot diminish that focus of trying to have a functioning and humane asylum system, which we currently sadly don't have, as you all know. And then on the migration side, yes, we need new opportunities, and we can talk about that. I think it's really needed also from, I don't know, demographic perspective, from an economic perspective, from an international power perspective, if you want, and also to give new opportunities to people in third countries. And migration has always been a reality in that regard, but as I said, I think we shouldn't mix the two. Maybe a couple of comments on the things that have, like on the topic as such and what has been said. I mean, Sophie said it very clearly. I think we need democratic oversight over any international deal that we do, and that is currently not always the case. And I think that actually weakens the deals that we do, especially when it comes to values and fundamental rights. So I think it's important to ensure this kind of monitoring, ensure this kind of democratic oversight when it comes to that. I think we can get better at understanding how EU money is used in international context. So there are many elements and ideas to that, but I think it's very clear that the examples of Sophie, for example, how money can be really misused in third countries, I think is something that shouldn't happen, and that is our responsibility versus the European taxpayers to ensure, and versus the people who are actually receiving the money, to ensure that this is not the case and that we uphold our values. The second question is the question of a balanced approach towards third countries. And here, I would say, I do read a bit of a carrot and stick approach out of the current proposal of the Commission, out of the Pact. And I think we should be a bit careful in how we approach this. To be honest, I quite like, Ylva, your home country's approach to, for example, labor migration, where you say it's double blind. I think it's double blind. It's blind to the skill level and it's blind to the country of origin. And this is my view of what our, our migration system should actually look like, so that we don't say, okay, you can send more people or you can get more visas if you accept more people for return. I think this kind of combination is a bit below our standard, and we should rather go to an approach, a multifaceted partnership approach, which cares about each individual issue, be it remittances, skill and personal development, any form of projects that we want to do together across the different fields of policy, and not force people in one or the other direction to accept returns. That is my personal view. When it comes to enhancing legal and labor migration, I think on resettlement, I think we can do more. There are good examples, as you know, from Canada of community sponsorship, and there are other things that we can look into to include that. I mean, one idea could actually be to, in the current proposed EU solidarity key within the proposal in the Pact, to also include resettlement. I think that's something we can look into. On labor migration, I mean, we have written within the Green Group a paper on third country, the crucial role of the third country migrant worker. We have many ideas in there, and Sophie and I have discussed also on some occasions about what we can do more, and I very much support her group's proposal to write this legislative report. I think it's a very good step forward to really show from Parliament's side that we honestly care about this, and we think we could do a bit more than is currently in the Pact when it comes to labor migration. Just to give some examples, I think student visas, job training, vocational visas, youth mobility schemes, there are many things we could look into more. A last remark on an idea that connects to the Swedish system. We proposed a pilot project on an EU talent pool and matching platform in the beginning of this year, because I think we can get to a model where we attract talent with an expression of interest-based model, where people are actually able to just register the interest to work within the European Union from wherever they are, and then we can try to see if we find employment within the European Union. And I think that's a great step, and I'm very happy it's improved, it's included at least with a feasibility study, I think, in the current Pact, and I think we can move in this direction to attract more talent and to ensure that we have a good cooperation with the countries of origin and help skill building also over there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Damian. In fact, actually, one of the key objectives of the UN Global Compact on Refugees is parliamentary engagement, and the role of national politicians and parliaments, not only in shaping up public opinion and debates, but also in monitoring and following up instruments which are implemented in the context of migration and asylum, and have this independent also monitoring of the effects on the ground. You were also, both of you, Damian and Sophie, were mentioning, how does that impact? What are the effects of these projects or instruments in these countries? And you also mentioned, Damian, looking at examples in other jurisdictions. In the ASILE Forum, we have few contributions actually looking at lessons learned or not to be learned from other jurisdictions, examples, including community partnerships or other complementary pathways for protection. And these contributions highlight the importance of the principle of additionality, non-discrimination, and that they keep a protection-driven focus. I invite the participants to have a look at our forum and some of those excellent blogs. So next in the panel is Sophie. Sophie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Sergio, and thank you for having us here today. I'd like to thank CEPS for inviting us, and also to note that we're very happy to partner with CEPS in the ASILE project, which is a key project as we move forward with the rollout of the Global Compact on refugees. Today's event comes at a really key moment in the weeks after the publication of the Pact. And it's very good to have this space to be able to discuss the key aspects of the Pact, in particular as it pertains to the external dimensions. As UNHCR, we very much welcome the publication of the Pact. We see it as a key opportunity to advance the Global Compact on refugees and the core objectives that are set out in the Global Compact. We're keen to support this initiative, and the High Commissioner for Refugees was here actually in Brussels on the 28th of September and met with Commissioner Johansson, continuing a close dialogue that they have in relation to the Pact and other matters. And he also had the opportunity to meet with a number of other commissioners, with Vice President Geddes, and also to discuss with the Commission President von der Leyen the following week by video conference. So for us, we see the Pact as broadly going in the right direction, and as a document that can try and move things forward from the difficult place the discussions have been in recent months and years. There is, of course, another discussion going on in terms of the internal aspects of the Pact that we're closely engaging in, but I'll focus today, given the topic, on the external aspects and partnerships in particular. As UNHCR, we very much welcome the priority that's afforded in the Pact to addressing forced displacement externally, so forced displacement that's happening outside of the European Union. And it's very good that right at the outset here of this event, many speakers, including the Commissioner herself, has recalled the important fact that the vast majority of the world's displaced are not in the European Union. They are in other regions, and they need to be supported. And I think there has been some useful discussion and discourse around the Pact to recall that there is no refugee crisis or migration crisis in the European Union. But there are great difficulties elsewhere, and we need the European Union and its member states to really step up. And we hope this Pact can be a move in the right direction there. The Pact contains a reference to the Global Refugee Forum, which was a key milestone event that UNHCR organized to try and move forward the discussion on the Global Compact. And the European Commission's Pact also includes a promise to deliver on the EU's commitments to be a reliable donor for refugee hosting countries. And here I think it is important to make the point that there is a lot of positive language in the Pact around the need for predictable funding. And this is something that we can't underestimate the importance of. It is very important that we have predictable, flexible, and adequate funding to support countries that are hosting the world's displaced, the vast majority of the world's displaced. There is a key opportunity in the Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, which is one of the new generation of funding instruments that the EU is going to be putting into place. And that includes a window of 10% of the funds to be spent on migration. Now, we're very keen that really be focused on forced displacement. It should really be focused on channeling funds to supporting the countries that are doing the most for hosting refugees in countries outside of the European Union. Another point I'd like to make is in relation to resettlement complementary pathways and legal pathways, as they're generally termed. And we heard the Commissioner run through the commitment to supporting resettlement and legal pathways that's contained in the Pact. So we really welcome the commitment that is there, and that commitment comes through a number of aspects of the Pact, including the recommendation on resettlement and humanitarian admission and complementary pathways. As the Commissioner has mentioned, the European Union has become a leader, perhaps unfortunately so, because other regions of the world have diminished their commitment to resettlement. We've seen that recently with the United States, and we've seen it also recently with Australia. So the European Union, it's even more important that it plays an increasing leading role when it comes to resettlement. Now, unfortunately, we were quite disappointed in terms of the quantum of resettlement that's envisaged in the Pact. As we saw in the recommendation on resettlement, the proposal is that European Union member states would resettle 29,500 refugees in 2020 and in 2021. It essentially extends the target for resettlement in 2020 to 2 years, so that those numbers of people would be admitted over a 2-year period. Now, we really welcome that the Commission has made clear that it is encouraging EU member states to resettle more than 29,500 people. And that's really, really needed, because the European Union member states resettled just under 25,000 last year and the year before that. And we know that COVID has caused a huge problem. Indeed, UNHCR and IOM ourselves, we suspended resettlement operations because of the problems of COVID earlier this year. But that suspension has been lifted now, and we really need for European Union member states to step up and to do much more when it comes to resettlement. There was a resettlement forum held by the Commission last week, and it was very good there to see the positive messaging from the Commission encouraging member states to do more. So when I say that we're calling on member states to do more, what specifically are we calling for? Well, there's a couple of things. The first is to resettle more than 29,500 people over 2 years. That's the point I made earlier. Secondly, we want more EU member states to get involved in resettlement. You know, all EU member states should be stepping up and doing resettlement. They should all be contributing. Thirdly, in order to help resettlement get back on track, we are encouraging member states to do more innovative things like remote interviewing, so that they don't hold up the resettlement operations because they can't go on selection mission or because of other difficulties. There are solutions to security screening. There are solutions to making these processes work, and many member states are piloting them, and we're happy to share more information in relation to those. Fourthly, we need to make sure that complementary pathways such as admission schemes for education, for labour, for family reunification, for family reunification, of course, is a separate issue. It's an entitlement for many relatives of refugees to come to the European Union under the Family Reunification Directive. And we need all of these measures to be on top of resettlement, not member states taking some places that they had put aside for resettlement and using them for complementary pathways. We need these things to be additional to resettlement opportunities. And then additionally, fifthly, we need more support for community sponsorship. That's an issue that the Commissioner touched on as well. There is a huge amount of goodwill in communities across the European Union to support people in need of protection. And we've seen these community sponsorship initiatives grow and thrive in many European Union member states. There are good models that we would like to see rolled out across the European Union, with everybody stepping up and getting involved in community sponsorship. This is a tool that can help resettlement and complementary pathways. A third point I'd like to make is in relation to integration. There's some very good language in the Pact around supporting integration. we really need EU member states to start spending money that's currently available to them under AMIF and AMF programs to support integration. And for resettlement and complementary pathways to be successful, integration is a core aspect of that. And finally, because I know time is very tight, just to underline the points that I'm making on resettlement, why is it important that EU member states step up on this? Well, the first is that it provides access to protection for people who really need it. The second is that it extends solidarity to those countries that are hosting the vast majority of the world's refugees. And thirdly, it gives a bit more credibility to this idea that resettlement and complementary pathways provide an alternative to dangerous routes for people who are engaging with smugglers or unfortunately get involved with traffickers in trying to find a safe way to find protection. That argument doesn't stack up if the numbers are so low. UNHCR estimated that the global need for resettlement last year in 2019 was 1.4 million refugees. So 1.4 million of the most vulnerable refugees in third countries desperately needed resettlement. So a commitment of 29,500 over 2 years is just not enough to stack up this idea that we can avoid dangerous routes by people opting to take legal pathways, because those numbers are just too low. So I think I'll leave it there, but an appeal, I think, in terms of the Pact to really support the measures that are there in the Pact, both on funding and on resettlement and complementary pathways. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, also for coming back and for highlighting that it is not enough. So in line with previous presentation and the Commissioner's presentation as well, when it comes to resettlement and legal pathways. Thanks, Sophie. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks to Sergio and to CEPS for inviting me to contribute. It's a really great opportunity for me to benefit from the insights of the participants and also perhaps share a little bit of the work that we've been doing at the Migration Policy Centre at the UI. And kind of jumping off point for me as I thought about what I was going to say was a remark Commissioner Johansson made and has been made previously as well about trying to have a more normal debate about migration. I think this is really important. Other panelists have picked up on it as well, kind of moving beyond the crisis, the idea of crisis responses. But I think in a way it's easier said than done. I think the debate about migration has become so imbued with the immediacy and urgency of crisis that longer term strategic thinking has become more difficult. And for that, I welcome many aspects of the Pact, which I think do try to adopt a more strategic focus. And part of that is the discussion about partnership. And that was something again raised by the Commissioner and picked up by other comments. And that's what I wanted to focus on just in this short comment on relations between African countries and the EU in the context of a more normal debate about migration, which presumably would involve this idea of partnership. And it's there, central to the Pact, tailor-made partnerships, as the Pact tells us, that will be, and again, quoting from the Pact, mutually beneficial. And the Pact also says that in these comprehensive partnerships, migration should be built in as a core issue based on an assessment of the interests of EU and partner countries. But this is not a new issue. Partnership has been on the agenda for, I think, at least 20 years. So it's a work in progress. There are many challenges. And what we've tried to do here at the Migration Policy Centre, and more specifically, I've been working with my colleague here at the MPC, Dr. Mahari Tadeli Maru, is to analyse African Union-European Union relations. And what we try to do is think about the meaning of partnership from the perspective of the AU, regional organisations and African countries. And so to kind of think a bit more systematically about also what the research evidence shows us, what can we learn, what have been the experiences, and to go straight to the point, the kind of main top line message that we found from our work and looking at the work of many scholars, and I think it links quite closely to the Global Compact on Refugees, is that tailor-made partnerships are essentially unthinkable without the active participation of national, local authorities and communities in African countries. And there's quite a lot of research evidence about what's called localization. Now, it's not a magic bullet. It's not an easy way to resolve issues, but I wanted to focus a little bit on that. But to think about localization as the basis for a strategic approach. And by that we mean that planning, implementation recognizes the importance of proximity and local expertise. And going back to a point made, I think right at the start by the Commissioner about global leadership, I think I'd argue that global leadership can benefit from local action. In fact, I would argue it depends upon local action. And by that, I think we can talk about engagement, proximity, expertise, and also the legitimacy of those things to reinforce partnership and create partnerships that perhaps are more meaningful and more likely to be successful. So I think what this means, I don't think this is a particularly, I think probably a point on which everybody involved in this panel would agree, is that migration governance needs to go beyond the response to irregular migration and displacement. If partnerships are to be developed, they're necessarily linked to a wider development agenda at national, local and international levels. And I think we also, the evidence is compelling, and it's quite a strong focus of the ASILE project that Sergio is leading from CEPS, that these challenges are unlikely to be resolved through, well, unlikely, they're not going to be resolved through short-term containment strategies at the borders of countries of origin, transit or of destination. So an agenda for partnership requires foresight, long-term strategic engagement, and of course resources. And I think that's one of the challenges, long-term strategic engagement in an area where policy has often been quite reactive, and longer-term engagement can be more challenging obviously because of the political cycle. And the components of this strategic agenda, which I think can inform localization, well, one of them we've already spoken about quite extensively, which is migration and protection regimes are protective of rights. And I think here regional frameworks and processes are crucial in Africa in the development of harmonized policy and standards. And that's something that with Mahari here at NPC, we've been working on quite a lot. But we would also add an additional point about the promotion of regional free movement, which does of course require regional policy harmonization. And there are examples in African regional organizations of attempt to develop regional free movement, and with the scope to develop complementary initiatives in relation to training, education, job market matching, just to pick out 3 examples, which all can impact on migration. I think this regional free movement agenda can be a very important component of the development of partnership, and can often conflict with efforts to impose tighter border controls and restrictions, which can make it more difficult for other regions outside of Europe to learn from the benefits of European integration in relation to regional mobility and free movement. So then how to follow up this, which kind of brings us back to the point about localization that I wanted to make. So our research, and looking at the work of many people who've looked very closely at this, is that we can see quite a lot of progress in what you might call norm setting, but the real challenges lie around implementation. And you can't get away from the fact that any discussion about implementation is a discussion about resources, devoting larger resources to plug gaps in funding, address institutional weaknesses, and help implement the recommendations that have been advanced in EU policy documents. But maybe devoting is not quite the right word, because there could also be scope to redirect resources to think about other priorities. Then I would say there's no magic bullet when we think about kind of how you build tailor-made partnerships, but the research evidence I think is quite compelling in showing the importance of localization as a kind of a planning and implementation mechanism, which brings us back to our top line message, really, the kind of point we've been trying to get across in some of the work we've been doing here at the NPC, which is that efficient and sustainable migration governance it is unthinkable without active participation of local communities, and local engagement is best placed to consider the particularities of particular areas, their issues, their priorities, and I think this requires decentralized planning and implementation that recognizes the need to embrace proximity, local expertise, and legitimacy, and to tailor interventions to local contexts. And so as a final point, and to conclude, I think we would suggest that a productive future path for relations between the African Union, European Union on migration and building of partnerships could be this focus on localizing migration agendas, developing migration governance that has a greater involvement by local populations who are included as vital participants in finding solutions to the challenges of migration governance that we would emphasize also in cross-border areas. And then the idea we would suggest for tailor-made partnerships is that they can be stronger if they're built from the local level upwards, and then supported by key international organizations and donors, which obviously includes the European Union. So, you know, it's an area where we're working with the NPC in a few minutes. I think we're just skimming the surface of what we've been able to do and what many other scholars have been looking at. And obviously what we're trying to do at the NPC is build research partnerships, work in major projects like ASILE, and work with partners like UNHCR precisely to try to develop some of these points and to translate it into measures and actions that can be more effective. So I'm very grateful for your attention and hand back to Sergio, so thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I think also that you've highlighted extremely important elements to keep in mind in our conversation today, but also in the implementation of the Pact, which is indeed this localization, as you named it, the importance of local tailoring instruments to the local. Not only knowing better about the impacts of whatever instruments are, in this case, supported or pursued by the EU in the scope of Africa and certain African regions and countries, but also, as you mentioned, the relationship with those countries' regional arrangements and integration. And you mentioned free movement, not only in Africa, also in South America, we have similar free movement elements, and how does the EU's approach, or how can this EU approach be tailored so that the consequences there actually serve the purpose of not making things worse or more difficult or completely incompatible to the local, simply not matching with local realities and needs. So thanks a lot for your presentation. Commissioner Johansson, would you like to respond to the comments raised by the panelists?
Yes, thank you. There was a lot of good things, so, and I will be brief so that we can have I will be brief so that we can have time for some questions also. But I think one thing I would like to say about partnership with third countries, I think historically, when it comes to migration in partnership with third countries, the European Union has been acting like we don't do anything until there is many people coming irregularly, and then we suddenly try to find a partnership on migration with that country. I don't think that's a good idea. I think migration is a normal thing, and migration is there. All countries globally are affected by migration in one way or another. So migration should be a normal part of the partnership. So I don't agree that you should say that you should never link migration with international aid or trade or so. I think that we should always link because migration should be part of the thing when we have partnership with third countries, because I think it's necessary to have it and not wait until we have a problem in some aspect. I just want also to mention about the resettlement, because I fully agree with the UNHCR that we really need to do more resettlement. And I would be very honest with you. What happened with the MFF that the Commission put forward? There were immediately, even before they discussed it in the Council, there were cuts made specifically in the migration area. And the cuts were specifically in the area of resettlement and relocation. So I have less money than we proposed to have for this. And this is, of course, an obstacle when it comes to encouraging member states to pledge for more if I can't really pay for that. So that's really an issue. Now the MFF is not decided yet, so it's now a negotiation between the Parliament and the Council, so we will see the outcome. But these are linked to each other. Also, of course, the money that is available for facilitating the resettlement. Also some words on integration, because I fully agree the importance of stepping up on integration. And I should say that when I look around the member states, some member states are quite experienced in working in integration. Others are not. and they need to learn how you work on integration. And now we do not only have the AMI for AMF, with quite small money there for integration, very close to when people arrive, but we have a lot of money in the ESF Plus, where I think it's 25% or something that is committed to inclusion and integration, and also for the regional funds. So this is now for the programming, and when member states will do the programming for these big funds with the huge, a lot of money, it's really important that they emphasis and put money and for integration. And I also planning to write to the member states together with Commissioner Schmidt and Commissioner Ferreira that are responsible for ESF Plus and the regional funds, so that we should push for more efforts when it comes to integration and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. A couple of elements that were highlighted by some of the discussants, and they are also reflected in some of the questions that the participants are currently uploading in the Q&A tool, comes back to this issue linkage in EU external policy. So some of the participants and the discussants mentioned the risks of using policies like trade policy or development policy in lieu of actual legal pathways. So actually making possible to people to move, and as a sort of quasi-deterrent or deterrence, so that people stay somehow there and they cannot actually move and look for protection elsewhere. I was wondering, what do you think about that aspect? You know, how do we address this the potential of shifting responsibilities instead of actually working together on something, as coming back to global solidarity? And this is linked, of course, to the issue of funding as well. Some of the participants and people providing some questions, writing up questions, are asking about, you know, how to ensure the impact. How can we monitor? How can we ensure that those funds actually do not create more damage than benefits when it comes to the local? You were highlighting in your presentation human smuggling. So when those notions travel to certain local contexts, how do we make sure that they actually can work in such a context, in light of socioeconomic realities, in light of, you know, ways in which people move or do business, or minority protections? So how do we tailor that in our understanding of when implementing the Pact?
Big issues, of course. I try to answer. I think it's important also with the mindset. Managing migration, working together with partner countries on migration, is not primarily on stopping people from migrating. It's about managing migration. Migration is normal, and all countries have to manage migration. And it's about, of course, fighting human smugglers and taking back their own citizens. But it's also about setting up proper asylum systems, having a good managing of migration in their own country. It's also about how to have good facilities and defending fundamental rights for migrants also in other countries. I mean, migration is something that is that all countries are dealing with, and we have to realize that many countries, our partner countries, need help in dealing with that, and we should also be there as a partner to help dealing with migration and managing migration in other countries. And then, of course, it's a very important question: is how do we make sure that our funds or partnerships that we make are really benefiting for migrants and for the country and not doing harm? Of course, that's a very, very crucial issue, and it's not one single answer to that. But that's why you have to tailor-made. I should say that you should be able to work with almost all countries, because we have migrants all over, and we need to deal with that. But you have to tailor how you do it. So in Turkey, for example, we have put a lot of money, and none of these money is going to the Turkish government. All money is going directly to migrants, refugees, the Syrian refugees. They have money on their card every month. So we pay directly to the refugees, and we also pay directly to the salaries for teachers and healthcare workers and doctors. And the only money that goes through the Turkish authorities are the money that we pay for the sanitary facilities, building schools, building hospitals, and healthcare facilities, for example. In other countries, we are paying also money directly to the government, and we have another kind of partnership. So it depends on how you can tailor the different kind of work together with different countries. Of course, some countries you have to be more cautious than others, and there is no single answer to how to make sure that your money really is coming the right way. But of course, this must always be very, very high up on the agenda and on in the focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any immediate follow-up, Sophie and Damian?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just so there be no misunderstanding, I'm not saying that we shouldn't connect or that migration should not be an element in external policies. And I think ultimately the Commissioner and I probably have exactly the same idea of what it should look like. But we also know that there are those who do feel that, for example, development aid should not be about development aid, but about keeping people out. There are enough people, in particular in the national capitals, who would really prefer to build Fortress Europe. So it's always a question of how do you interpret things. And I'm really fiercely opposed to somehow transforming development policies into migration policies. About the Turkey deal, for example, the Commission is absolutely right when she says the money is not going to the Turkish authorities. However, the deal was concluded 1 week before the Turkish elections. And all people knew was that there was going to be a substantial amount of money, 6 billion euros, which greatly helped Erdogan at the time in getting elected. So, you know, there's a lot of things can always be interpreted in different ways. And I think that we have to be very clear. If we want migration to be part of external policies, but then for the purpose of managing migration, as the Commissioner says, and not for the purpose of stopping migration, which incidentally is a complete and utter fiction. Those who pretend that they can close the borders are lying deliberately to their voters.
Thank you, Sophie. Damian?
I mean, my point goes very much in the same direction, so I'll be short. But I think I also don't want to say that, you know, we shouldn't have migration as an element of an overall relation with other countries. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to make them too conditional on each other. And yes, maybe my philosophy goes a bit too far, but I do believe that the Swedish system, as I said, isn't that bad. You know, you try to say, it doesn't matter which country you come from, here are the rules for entering the European Union for labor migration visa. That's just the idea that I think a European system for me should look like in the end. And therefore to, you know, alter this for every single like for every single country out there in order to pressure them to do something else or to keep in their migrants, I think I'm not sure if that helps. But on the other side, to build a functioning asylum system in a third country, yes, that's obviously useful, and support can always be helpful there. But I think it's just very often the danger that we fall back into deterrence, because currently, I mean, as I said, our current system is deterrence by suffering. And if then at some point it becomes some other form of deterrence by other means, I think it's also not, I mean, could be an improvement, but like it's still not, I think, where we want to be.
Thanks. Sophie, Andrew, any follow-up comment? Otherwise, there is the one participant mentioning interested in Sophie's allusion to or reference to the Parliament's own initiative on legal pathways. And the participant is asking exactly for more details about this proposal and how does that differ from the EU Pact, the EU Pact's approach on legal pathways.
You want me to answer that? Yeah.
Please, Sophie. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's like this. The European Parliament, strictly speaking, doesn't have the right of initiative. That's the prerogative of the European Commission. However, there is an article in the treaties. Don't ask me which one now. but that allows us to draw up what we call legislative initiative proposals. It's just that the Commission is not then obliged to do anything with it. But President von der Leyen, when she was up for election, she promised that she would treat legislative initiative proposals by the European Parliament as if Parliament has the right to initiative. So basically what we want to do as a Parliament is write a draft law for legal labor migration. And of course we have different instruments already. We have the blue card and we have, you know, there are different instruments, but they're all very small and narrow and limited and basically not being applied in practice. So we need a proper law for legal labor migration, comprehensive. So that is what we're going to be working on. And once we have finalized that, we'll put a nice little red ribbon around it and offer it to the Commission, to Mrs. Johansson, to Mrs. von der Leyen, and then. And I think the reason we're doing it is because we feel that, you know, we can talk about asylum until the end of times and come up with any sort of arrangement, but unless we also create legal pathways for labor migration, we are never, ever, ever going to resolve the asylum issue. The two go together. They're two pillars. They're two sides of the same coin. And that is why we want to do this legislative initiative now, to also you know, let it weigh on the process of dealing with the Migration Pact.
Thank you, Sophie. Just I remember also Parliament calling for humanitarian visas, very clearly supporting the idea of building an additional possibility for people to make it, you know, people looking for international protection. And of course, this is also there. It's been there for some time with no progress, no real progress. Damian, any points on the legal pathways before we close the meeting?
Maybe just a quick comment on what Sophie said. I think it's true. I think there is two elements where we can do more when I look at the Pact, and I know that Ylva, you have been working quite hard on getting it to the current level, but I mean, it's our role to always see what can be improved. In terms of additional arguments, I won't comment on the whole Asylum Pact as it stands, or part as it stands right now, but I think it's true that on the integration, and I'm very happy that you took this up again, there is more that we could do. I think there's so much to think about how to help communities who welcome asylum seekers, at the same time, help them to integrate and to build a stronger community in itself. So I think that's a huge point. And then on the resettlement, yes, I mean, I know that the money is an issue, and we're fighting, hopefully alongside the Commission, with the Council, with the member states, to bring more money into these fields, and I'm very happy to support that also as part of the budget committee whenever possible. And when it comes to additional humanitarian corridors, I'm a big fan of that. I think Parliament has shown that we are in support of that, and now we just need to see how we can make it reality in each of the member states, or what role the EU can play in that regard. Apart from that, thanks a lot for the good discussion.
Thank you. And, you know, it's been nice and short. We need to put an end to this discussion. But I think we've learned a big deal. We've shared a big deal of ideas and views on how to build legitimate partnerships in the field of migration, and the kind of expectations that we, you know, share, or ideas that we have from our respective positions. Certainly, in the ASILE project, we will continue working on these issues, providing research, independent research and knowledge, and allowing for this kind of venues to have a conversation, a meaningful and evidence-based also conversation. So really, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you all the discussants for joining us today. Have a wonderful continuation of the day. Bye-bye. Bye.